Welcome, and thank you for joining me on the Spiritual Ninja podcast, where we have heart to heart conversations with people who live with spiritual depth and elite performance. Hello, and welcome to the Spiritual Ninja podcast. I'm really happy for us to have this time together today, and I'm very interested in hearing about your own spiritual journey as well as the incredible work that you're doing. So, once again, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Thank you. As I was preparing for this, I experienced this gratitude to you. First of all, the label spiritual ninja. I mean, God's a spiritual ninja, and therefore we are too. So I love that. And I love the way that you offered other podcasts that I've heard, and the frequency that really comes through is a frequency of blessing. And I just wanted you to know that.
Thank you. It's very sweet and very touching. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I really feel that, and it touches me deeply because the intention of this is just to really serve, love, God, universe, and I appreciate that you're experiencing that from it. So thank you.
Yeah. No, I can even feel how that touching has actually touched you deeply.
Mm,
Little tears
mm.
behind your eyes and my eyes, and this is the sacred right here. We don't even have to try. I mean, this is it. Mic drop. We're done.
Yeah, totally. I think we're all seeking this, no matter what we're doing, whether we know it or not. We're looking for this place of deep awe and rest and love, and knowing that our time is being well spent.
Oh, completely. Because I'm a physician. And I've moved in so very many different worlds, many worlds, learning all the time. But it is important for me to say that what I'm offering here in this frequency of blessing is my own experience. That's all we can ever do. And that it's not intended to be factual and imposing myself on anyone else who's listening. So therefore, if it doesn't resonate, and that word resonance is so important, then put it aside. Let it be what it is. But I'll stay true to me. And this isn't medical advice in any way. I speak about aspects of medicine. I might speak about aspects of psychotherapy, but it's not meant to be either one of these at all. It's simply a participation in a discussion. And it's funny too, if I might share that, coming into this present moment, which is the only moment really we have, there's no other moments in it. And again, in preparing, I noticed myself in the last half hour feeling anxious. I don't know
Mm,
if you felt a little tremulous too, right?
mm.
This is a thing. We're showing up to an altar of some kind, right?
Yeah, because we care. We care so much.
We care. And there's sort of, one of the chaplains in my hospice, Drew Southern, talks about a transparency before God. And when we really show up or preparing to show up, there's a tremulousness. And I noticed how I was moving a little faster, kind of jerky,
Mm,
and then I went, sweetie,
mm.
just be with you right here. And then I tuned in and I noticed that my throat was a little dry. So I got myself some warm liquid and I started and my hands wanted to play with colors. So I brought out my colorful crayons and, I was making notes on paper. So I just colored a golden light of awareness all around
Hmm.
what I had printed. And that brought in all these aspects of me asking. And it was really so sweet. And how I sit isn't some sort of a prescribed algorithm, but it's how my body feels rested and present. So, yeah. So thank you. Thank you for this work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. And for you, you and I have never met before. And just by already being here with you and just our short text here and there, I can tell your love and sacredness for the truth of it all. So that's always humbles me. And I love that. That's to me the thing that turns me on the most in life. And I always love feeling that from anybody. And when I'm able to remember and rest in it, it's the most delicious experience of life.
Another mic drop, the word delicious.
Yeah, yeah. When I speak with you right now and feel you and hear you, it's very clear. It's not clear how you got here, which I want to ask you about, but it's very clear that you're in here in a very beautiful experience within yourself. However you would word that. What if you look back in your life, whether for some people, and I've had my mind kind of blown in different ways with different people because I always just assumed that we all were kind of tortured on some level, and then we found truth, love, and God from the pain. But some people have shared that from the get-go, they were already doing these practices for for whatever reason. That was, I mean, I always felt sensitive in certain things, but I was not aware of consciously of resting into love or God or meditation or whatever somebody likes to call it. And so for me, it was a big separation that made a yearning to find something deeper. And I'm just curious if you look back of how your spiritual journey started and your process to where you are today, because there's probably a lot of similarities that people can relate to, but also yours is very uniquely yours. And so I think just you sharing it as intimately as you can allows people to almost be inside of you and feel where you were and what you went through and how you got to here.
Yeah, so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for naming, Jonathan, that sense of separation. Now I'm in trauma, then I'm looking for a release, and now I'm here. And what's so interesting is because I had asked everything I know to guide me in this space with you. And as soon as you asked that question, it wasn't what I had prepared for. It was, I was already here. I was always already here. I, um, and I, it was like something in the background that was always playing and has really come to the forefront now. That makes it a difference. And I venture to say with humility that this is actually the same for all of us. That there's an already, there's another word there. This is already here. I will share. And anything, I just want to say that anything we share in words is always narrative. That narrative changes because the energy changes and it makes it sound fixed. And none of this is fixed because every time I come back, I see it with a different perspective.
Mhm.
And really, that's how we already know from telling one story. And Jonathan, you may have had likely a path through the woods of trauma, and that each time you tell it, you notice something a little bit different, which really tells you, wow, there's something else happening already inside of me,
Mhm.
something unfolding. So that's the mystery. But so I'll offer words. Words are really not, they're approximations of the ineffable. But I was raised in a Brahminic Vedic culture.
Mhm.
So even if my parents weren't necessarily religious, I think my father is deeply spiritual. And I have been told by intuitives who, that I had come to be with my father as a
Mhm.
teacher. And that's only half the story. I think my mother is a profound teacher as well. But even then, I was really drenched in these stories, right? In these narratives of meaning and resonance and presence. I want to say in here that I've just come back from India a few weeks ago. And in India, if you've ever been, and some listeners might have, you always feel like 9 billion people are around you. And there's sounds and starting at 5 a.m. So is this and smells and blah, 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 blah. And this time I noticed that I felt more quiet and more still
Mhm.
inside me. And I went, wow, that's really interesting. And I think that the reason is because it's a culture of reverence, which doesn't mean people are nice to each other.
Mhm.
But there's a background of reverence in everything, that capacity to just namaste and to bow to things before stepping in.
Mhm.
That reverence inside of us awakens the mystic that we already always are. So I grew up in that, and yes, I met a lot of trauma,
Mhm.
and I'm a very open book, happy to share whatever, but I don't know if that distracts. But yes, there was violence in my home, there was violence in the culture, there's a huge hierarchy in a caste system in the culture,
Mhm.
a history of colonization, um, a meeting with multiple sexual violations
Mhm.
this in this little body, and somehow it didn't stop. The background of something never stopped. And as I grew older and started to name it, and of course, I've had decades of therapy, right?
Mhm.
I've done my work. And my friends who are therapists joke and say I process 24/7.
Mm,
No longer true. There's a place in which I feel really landed and nothing needs to change. And I think it's a more of a fifth dimensional in some other vernacular space where I notice what's arising and I tend to it.
mm,
Everything's always arising, but I went towards science, even though other parts of me wanted to do other things. But I went towards science. I've had so many mystical experiences in my life that from the background kept saying, here we are.
mm,
And some part of me would go, this isn't outside. This something here that feels deeply familiar. But of course, I didn't have the language and
mhm,
it's a developmental phase for the brain and for the human. We're humans. This is what we go through. And I remember, and all of these mystical experiences that I've had seemed, most of them have happened within the context of living life,
mm,
of feeling panic coming on and sitting in the middle of panic, tending to it, or in the midst of a classroom, right? And this one, I think one of my earlier experiences that felt really cogent and narrative friendly, perhaps, is I was sitting, it was 15 or 16, 15, and we were learning thermodynamics in chemistry. And I was, really good at all of that stuff and learning about the laws of thermodynamics. And of course, beyond thermodynamics, later I studied quantum chemistry and quantum physics as an undergraduate, but I went, wow, already that's beyond Newtonian science of cause effect, which is sort of where we live, right? We live in that more third dimensional cause effect, fight, flight, survival. But thermodynamics talked about how energy is never created nor destroyed, just changes from one thing to the other. And the second law. And I went outside and I'm in tears even thinking about this now, even though it wasn't emotional. I just went, God is energy.
mm,
Prior to that, I hadn't really used the words God. And I looked around, all the other kids were just moving around, and I said, why is nobody else blown apart?
mm.
And I felt this deep opening and alignment and a sense of reverence and wonder. And I think that's one of the earliest experiences. I mean, earlier, lots of stuff, in dreams, seeing things before they happen, and all of that was always happening. A very, very sensitive and open kid.
It's beautiful. When you were speaking, a few questions popped out. Two were about you directly, and then one was just about humanity. So when you were speaking about growing up in this system that in some ways really is nurturing being sacred and some of the traumatic things that happen, whether it was in that culture or not, it always points, do you hear the thunder over thunder lightning? The skies are
Yeah,
joining us here.
really cool.
Yeah, yeah. So when I try to really, from my heart, my soul, just step back and look at all this, I'm just calling it the magical spark, just because God, love, whatever that is, there's something that is so magical and mysterious that everything comes from. It just seems like that's logic and science and spirituality, everything combined. And from that, like you're saying, it's already there. It's already in us, the wisdom, the love. And there's all different stories and reasons why people say, oh, humans are separate and all this. But really, who knows? But what we do know is there's certain vibrations or states of consciousness that make us feel right and home and aligned with that purest vibration, and ones that make us feel separate. And so I'm amazed sometimes within humanity, but it makes sense to me. But let's say it doesn't matter if you're talking about at a hospital or you're talking about Supreme Court, if you're talking about spirituality, humans seem to have a very difficult time having power, or a very difficult time of keeping something sacred as an experience instead of an idea. And I feel like when people get into these extremes, like even spirituality, and I've done this, I'm like, this is the way it is. It's not the vibration of the purest thing in us. And therefore it causes something, a behavior or an energy that's imbalanced and putting upon to other people. And then a lot of people in spirituality can use spirituality as a guise of like, oh, this is God speaking through me to you. And, it's not traumatic or whatever it may be. And I just think it's wild how the human has this capacity for what's already there, this beautiful love, and then to somehow not be with it and to do horrific things to ourselves or others. And so when you were talking about the trauma that's happened to you and being in the culture you're in, it's just so fascinating how this country of India or wherever, I don't want to assume I know what exactly you're talking about, but just that you can have the purest, humble, innocent love of God. And then in the same system, under that umbrella, people could be doing horrific things.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's always kind of mind boggling.
It's mind-boggling, but it's also about the mind.
Yep,
Thank
exactly.
you for saying that. I mean, if when have been one of the many things that really was a teacher to me is can look at neurobiology, right? The simplest neurobiology. We know that, let me take a moment to really get present so that these aren't just words and concepts, but something that we can feel. We know, as I did just before joining you, that there's tremulousness. That tremulousness was the fight flight system in the brainstem. And in trauma, of course, when the rupture is really big, it becomes freeze and fawn and, you know, all the F words. But that's the nervous system of survival, and it's deeply innocent. And in fact, as children, we come in, you've seen babies, they've got these wide eyes. You look into the eyes and you drop into God right there. There's no separation. But they're here to develop a sense of self. And as they're developing a sense of self, they do it both through the love that they're receiving, the nurture, and that eye gaze that, if we're getting it, tells our mirror neurons, oh, I have a self. Because there's people who experience neglect. And, I just want to be tender here that you might hear this in the audience. And if you are someone who received neglect, that you may not have had the eye gaze that told you that you were a self. And in some ways, the abuse that I was a part of and that I grew up with was a blessing because it gave my self something to push against. So that's really important to know. So growing up, we not only encounter love if we're lucky, but also things that threaten this body, small things that threaten. And that's also culturally derived threats and what the collective is holding as a bad thing.
Mm.
And so we develop programs in our head that create something that we might call an ego. I don't actually like the term ego. I like the term our human, our personal self, our structured mind, or if we want to get technical, the default mode network.
Yeah, sometimes I just say personal story. It's just like our personal story because it's just that. It's our personal story. Yeah,
And it's perfectly legitimate.
totally. Yeah, yeah. And there's no judgment of it. I think in the spiritual world, sorry for interrupting, but the whole ego thing, it's very easy for it to be like, oh, that's my ego. And it's like, no, that system was set up for something and there's beauty to it. It's just that we need to take care of it. We can't rely on that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just want to riff, but I'll stay here. And so when you talked about the sense of separation, when we're in threat, the prime directive, Star Trek, is to protect and survive. The world is in survival mode collectively, almost all the time, with pockets of people, contemplatives perhaps, but even they need to learn how to live and not dissociate and transcend something. It's nothing to transcend and everything to be with. But that's innocent. And in survival, we might call it quote unquote third dimension. I'm just playing with these ideas. And it sounds hierarchical and it's not. I think it's more circular in the shape of a zero, which is just fullness. But when we start to step out of the startle or the activation of the nervous system towards its own survival, when we start to calm, something else starts to happen. And we start to move towards more of what trauma therapists call the social engagement system, right? The little prefrontal cortex then starts to go, I don't have to protect. I can actually do something. I can grow. I can learn. I call that fourth dimension. It's still a kind of a tricky place where we think that growth is from top down. After I graduated from med school in Chapel Hill and got married, and my husband and I traveled to India, he hadn't been there, and we spent time because I was learning some Ayurvedic medicine. And I'm not an Ayurvedic doctor, but I learned so much of it, brought me back to the Sanskrit of my past. And he said something that is like a incredibly easy. And that is, he said, translating a Sanskrit sutra from the Vedas, when the body's at rest, the mind is calm and alert. And within a calm and alert mind, one can see divinity within oneself and all others.
Hmm.
It's not separate. Let's say your bladder's kind of full and it's pressing down. Men sometimes have teeny weeny bladders compared to women. But the more we aren't able to, because we're in the midst of a podcast, you're seeing a patient, whatever it is, we're not able to honor that. There's a little bit of a tension and a tiny threat in the body, which then gets translated into an emotional experience. And then we think, oh my gosh, and then there's a tizzy and an analysis, and soon we're out there in a survival mode, even in a tiny way. So what this is saying is it's not the body as at rest, meaning we snooze and we collapse out of whatever is going on. It's when we tend to the body, as I did before coming here, and we soften in, and we're really listening. What do you need, sweetie? It's not, breathe slowly and deeply, take a deep breath. Well, I say that sometimes, but even that's top down. It's, sweetie, how do you feel you want to be breathing right now? Because in anxiety, you need to be able to breathe more quickly. That's a natural reflex, but shutting that down doesn't help us. So we're following the cue of the body. The body doesn't speak in words. It speaks in sensation. It speaks in relief. It speaks sometimes in a lived experience of emotion. And all of that is a portal if we tend to it. And there, tending to it, the nervous system just softens. There's nowhere to go. There's nothing to do, nothing to prove. And we see divinity within oneself and all others. And therefore, this is where the namaste comes. And what happens in India is that there's that whole continuum. In India, I'm saying India is a mix of many, many, many religions. And somehow I feel this reverence in all of them. I read this really cute book. I think when we were at that time, 2001, 2000, going to India, and Mark and I read this book called Holy Cow. And if you can find it, that's so adorable. It's about this Australian woman who followed her partner. And while he was working in New Delhi, she said, okay, I'm going to go explore all the religions in India. And it's funny that, this is being brought through because, again, this isn't something I had written down, but this is what happens when spirit is just guiding a process. At the end of the book, she says, I can really feel it. She says, the reason that there are 900 religions in India is because the cycle of violence needs an extreme amount of love to break it. And there's the thunder opening the sky. All right, that's all it is. That's it. That's all we need. But then we sit in love, and my whole life has been an exploration of what love is, right? Because it's circumscribed, as you know. Everybody's got 1,000 things. It's top down. Love is this. It's not that. It's this and that. It's this action. It's not. And that's all dualistic mind. That's okay. That still is coming out of a desperate need to not feel the fight, flight, freeze of survival. And that's okay. But at some point, when we calm, when the nervous system calms and we're simply with the self as she is, as he is, as they are, as one is, I like the pronoun one, there is a sense of a field within that is love. It feels unconditional. It feels like a diffuse, it feels like beauty and like grace. It feels like abiding. They're all different frequencies, different nuances and hues of the same frequency. And so, so this too feels like this lifelong process, and it keeps evolving. I remember in the midst of my therapy, and I, as I said, I've allowed, and I'm so happy I received it, that Sally, my teacher and my therapist, said to me, you just love wildly, you can't help it. I was still unpacking that. What does that really mean? I know I could feel it as an emotion, but it's deeper than an emotion. It's a field.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think if somebody has the experience of love or God or whatever maybe that they call it, they can totally resonate with what they feel from you and what you're saying. And let's pretend for a moment that somebody is very open to this, but isn't quite sure how to make that inner journey. So if you look back at the different practices that you've used or helped other people, introduced other people to use, that you feel like, wow, these are some of the practices that have really helped me rest into this place that we're talking about. And then on the flip side, when things come up that really seem to have you identify with those and think that just that to be your reality instead of the other. And
Thank you. Thank you, love. And I just want to reflect how much I love the organic flow of your response.
hmm,
And it's just springing. I could just feel this energy just like a fountain coming through you. And it's not circumscribed. You're not looking at a book of your questions.
you
You're
know,
in real time, in presence with me, and we're humans, just having fun with each other and playing. And I love that. It just feels so good. I just wanted you to know that the very way in which you're asking these questions in a way that have no real response, because anything that I say is just an approximation, but we're in that together. And so thank you. Thank you for your reflections. I feel met. I feel seen. And that softens me right there. And, trauma therapy, I'll just start somewhere because there's a billion things I can say, and
hmm.
it'll take us the next 24 hours. I'll start with trauma therapy since I said that. The teachers there, many, many teachers are beautiful. Dan Siegel out of Stanford, Gabor Mate. There's this sense in the neurobiology of trauma that and I keep coming back to trauma because this tender nervous system, because if you hold one of those, Hobby Lobby feathers in your
Hmm,
hand and you even breathe on it, it'll ruffle. That's our nervous system. That, when my beautiful friend Karin Drummel, who's an incredible traumatologist, brought that through to me, just my life changed. So because our tender nervous system is experiencing threats, therefore I talk about trauma, not as a another identification for the heaviness of the default mode network. And I think that we speak of trauma a lot, and it becomes a refuge for many who haven't been recognized. And then after a while, it starts to become a heavy identification.
hmm,
Keeps us actually from feeling that expansiveness inside. It keeps us top down because we don't trust yet. But it's okay. It all unfolds beautifully at just exactly the right time. Just trust. So starting with trauma therapy, the neurobiology, the antidote to trauma is attachment and attunement.
hmm,
In our living human world, attachment and attunement equals love. If we experienced attachment in our childhood, but no one gazed in our eyes and could sense our hunger or the need to be outside or the need to be held, there was no attunement.
hmm,
What came through for me, so I've studied that for decades and been with that, with people, without even naming it. My attachment, I renamed MD from
hmm.
medical doctor and then major deity to mother doctor. I'm here to really be a mom, to be a
It's
mama.
beautiful.
Yeah, not in a dense,
No, no,
fitting
no.
way, but a true mother tends and tends warmly.
Hmm,
Doesn't problem solve with the 3-year-old in front of her. Let's figure this out. Just listens and says,
hmm,
come sit here with me. Come sit on my lap.
hmm,
You hungry, baby? You look sad, right? So this is the kind of tender attunement we get to offer each other, and particularly to ourselves. Learning about that was life-changing because I went, this is it. Here, living here, no attachment, no attunement. I'm going to be flailing around.
hmm,
In Ayurvedic terms, I'm going to be all vata aggravated, airy-fairy, out in
hmm,
the clouds, trying to transcend, which is a form of dissociation, out of this beautiful human existence, which our souls chose to be here. That's my opinion. And that's why the already is already here, because that's unfolding and showing itself over time. So that's one thing. And then more recently, in a very, very deep contemplative space in a journey, I was shown that communion is that attunement and that nurture of self, that mother child connection right here. That's That's the bliss. Don't wait around trying to
Mhm.
do it with your mom or your dad or with the people who sexually abused you or the soccer coach who didn't validate you. It's here. I'm
Mhm.
here. And I get downloads all the time. In fact, they pour in so much I can't even keep up. I try, I scramble. I've got notes everywhere sometimes. But one of the things that came through was it's funny that I didn't even realize that until I was writing it down last night. This came through many years ago. It was come home, turn on the lights, and settle in. And it's very similar to the frequency of what Rumi is saying. Close your eyes, fall in love, and stay there. He's not meaning collapse out of life. When he
Mhm.
says close your eyes, he means step out of fight, flight, right? Fall in love and just stay there. But my version, which is a very embodied, because I'm a woman, I've borne babies, is this is home. This is hearth. The body is the hearth. We're not heads carrying around the body. It's continuous. So that's one thing.
Yeah, so with the one you're talking about right now, like I'll speak for myself, but just I always want to offer people that are like, I don't know how to do that, maybe some input. So I know for me at one point, there was something in me that didn't feel like I was enough, whatever that was. That's where I got to. Once I realized that, I'm like, okay, that's just part of being a human. That's okay. And I learned to embrace and love it. And I have peace with that. But for people that, like, let's say, for example, when you're saying like they're experiencing trauma, and sometimes for people, it's either, I think it's one or two, they're like, oh, I deserve this. I'm a piece of something, or such anger, or it's very difficult to move on because of what they feel toward the other person. So I'm wondering inside, like what you're talking about, I have a similar experience in my own way of learning to come from love and take care of that. But I'm curious for yourself and others, how have you seen them go from identifying with the shame or identifying with the hatred to being able to separate from that, identify with love and take care of that?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy you stopped to share that because there's a way in which someone hearing what I'm saying hears you need to do this by yourself. And I went through decades of being with my shame and being with all of my feelings, with being with rage and with profound terror and horror and anxiety. Anxiety is
Mm,
small compared to those things, right? I didn't do it alone. I couldn't have. It had to be with a loving other, someone well trained, not just family and friends who, although that's really a huge part of the container, a sense of belonging and community goes a long way to softening that shame, that banishment, and that otherhood that we experience when not feeling welcome in life.
mm,
And yeah, and there were times I wanna say that I had a loss that was so profound, the loss of my first marriage, that I felt suicidal, and
mm,
that's when I took myself to therapy. Best thing ever. Thank God for the suicidality because it ended me where my training needed to be. So it's so important that we don't do this by ourselves, and that, Karin, my friend, says premature forgiveness is like putting whipped cream on caca,
mm,
right?
mm.
And you might not want me to say that word on your lovely podcast.
No, that's totally fine. This is about
Okay.
life.
Premature forgiveness is like putting whipped cream on shit. And anybody hearing this is just going to throw themselves backwards laughing
Mm,
because we all experience the spiritual bypass of forgiving before we're ready. What even is forgiveness? It's simply the understanding that we're humans together, but we can't arrive there.
mm,
It's funny. I had another download that happened while I was sitting waiting to have a mammogram. This was about 10 years ago. And I was sitting there, of course, feeling tremulous. And all of a sudden, all the men who had abused me, right,
mm,
came through and it felt like they were right there in my head. I wasn't seeing things. And each of them said, we were here to bring you fear,
mm,
the gift of fear. We were here to bring you the gift of shame. And I just bowed to each of them because I was ready and I said, thank you. And that spiritual experience happened after so much inner work. And had I had not done the inner work, that would be self-abandonment. And self-abandonment is a form of violence to the self. It's
mm.
It's redoing what we've encountered.
So, hearing what you're saying, I just want to make sure that I'm expressing it clearly. So, let's say right now someone's really identifying with the trauma, with the shame, with the hatred. If they have a therapist or a professional that they're able to have a healthy attachment with and have a mature relating with, that's going to allow them to start the healing process of being able to then have an alignment with love and God and know themselves as that.
Yes.
So, because they're able to have a healthy human relationship that prepares them to have a healthier God relationship is my
That's right. And I want to say here that psychotherapy and trauma therapy, by definition, because of the ethics and scope of practice, have a glass ceiling. It's not even glass a lot of the time, right? Unless somebody's doing contemplative psychotherapy, it's opaque. It's keep working on yourself the whole life is what sometimes is what we come away with. And this is the reason now why psychedelics and as a form of contemplative psychotherapy has really come in because it's not only work with what's here, but sweetie, once we do that, we see the divinity in oneself and all others. And, Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, and all of the non-dual philosophies, they've been holding this forever. It's just we're understanding this in a fresh new way, not in a way that made cultural sense 2000 years ago or even 100 years ago. So, yeah, it's not just therapy. Starting to feel, there's a Hafiz poem, if I could share,
yeah, please.
because poetry also comes through me, and I love some poetry, not all of it. But how did the rose ever open its heart and give to this world all its beauty? It felt the encouragement of light against its being. So that light can come in the form of another loving, relating other, trustworthy, non-abandoning, but it also comes in the form of somebody who's not only holding therapeutic presence, but a loving presence. Someone
Mm.
who has themselves felt the presence of the divine within themselves. And there you go, you start to feel more and more of the encouragement of light. And I love in this poem how it starts with the first word, how, not
Mm.
what, because the third dimensional cause effect survival thinking is almost always what. It's how.
So, with that, how I would like you to continue, if you would, about how you like the journey you just explained so far is really clear of getting a professional to support you to deal with the shame, the trauma. And
Right.
then what other
What
things,
other things?
practices have you done
Yes.
on either side of that have helped you connect to love God, have helped you when you didn't,
Yeah.
when something was interfering?
And um, Ayurveda had a huge impact on me. It was really something easy to translate into the medicine, the family medicine, and then hospice and palliative care and integrative psychiatry and whatever else I do with people because Ayurveda says you and the universe are one. Here's the evidence of it. Air is out there and air is in the body, right? You know that, right? The movement of air in the body, the air moving through the hollow viscus, the intestines, right? The nerve impulses. Fire is out there, and there's fire in your body that shows up as visual perception, understanding, the pancreatic enzymes, the digestive process. Earth is here, and earth is in the body in the form of your muscles. Water is out there, and water is in the body. You know, 3/4 of us or 2/3 of us is water. It just here's a tiny example of my profound child. I have two children, and they're both incredibly open. I mean, my gosh. When Sita was 8 years old, she said, "What is going on with all these religions?" And she drew an image of a god
Mm.
sitting with many arms. And she said, all of these arms are all of the religions. And Rowan, when he was 3 years old, we were outside waiting for Sita to finish her gymnastics. And he said he was thirsty. So I took him to the water fountain and I said, Rowan, what amount of water is on the earth? And he said, 3/4 of the waters of the earth is water. I said, what about the body? And he said, most of the body, mama, And so I said, go ahead and drink. And he looked at me, 3 years old, and he said, So when I'm drinking water, I'm drinking myself.
Mm.
And so this is an example of how we know it's always in the background. We're incredibly amazing, we're incredibly special, and we're all special. We're all valued the same. And that is a lesson that's come through again and again in the teachings that download. You can be a murderer and you're loved and valued exactly the same. And I could have studied something with a billion mystical experiences for, 59 years, and I'm valued exactly the same. So I think Ayurveda is a great start because my Ayurvedic teacher said the journey to enlightenment is 30 centimeters. It's a metric system, 22 inches, whatever. It's the distance between the head and the heart. And you could say the rest of the body. Coming back to that sutra that he had said, it's also, I discovered the distance between a mother's eyes and a baby at her breast. That's the attachment and attunement right there. And so Ayurveda specifically, because it talks about an entire system, that it's continuous. It's not one or the other. It's not mind or body or spirit. It's
Mm.
all experienced simultaneously. And that's what integration is. I can be feeling. This morning, I received a message from Sita. Last year, she had a lot of surgeries for her hips, and
Mm.
it was an x-ray, she said. And she said, I just saw the orthopedic in Germany where she is. And she says, kind of mixed news, something's not healing correctly. Of course, I responded with some anxiety.
Mm.
And I swallow even as I tell that story. And I rested into myself and I just tended to whatever was showing up, not judging, not fixing, not
Mm.
trying to move it away. And it came to a place where everything opened up. And again, this is a longer thing, but I have to say, this is so cute. I'm looking to see where I had made that note. Oh, yes. So all of a sudden, this song that I hadn't heard in 30 years starts to play in my head. Believe it or not, I'm walking on air.
Mm.
Never thought I could feel so free. And I notice that no matter how intense the challenge, and I've had some intense challenges recently,
Mm.
that when I stay with it, when I cheerlead myself on, when I'm truly tending with love, with presence, with patience, with softness, with breath and with slowness, something unfolds. I'm watching the energy arising and I'm watching it change. This is embodied spirituality. Often there's a sense, and it can happen in minutes, it can happen in days. There's a sense of, oh, I just graduated. Those are not even words that the mind thinks, and something happens. There's this expanded feeling inside. I haven't changed. The challenge hasn't changed.
Mm.
Something moved and shifted. And that's really sacred. So one of my downloads that I'm starting to teach people is something that I'm calling rest, which alludes, of course, back to my Ayurvedic teacher's offering, which is relational, embodied spirituality of tending. That's what
Mm.
it is. Stay embodied, stay in the hearth. And from this hearth, there's a warmth that everybody can feel. There's an unconditional love that everybody feels. And so we're relational. We're relational with life. We honor life. We love life. But that sounds like a concept. It's not of life. But it's something that just arises. We participate.
Yeah. When you spoke about therapy and Vedic, those are things like people can go do, right, and get support. And they can be more of the mind, the body, the spirit, all of it. And then what you're talking about now, I think that everyone, and please correct me if I'm missing a part of this, but like, let's say for so many people, if they see a young child, like you're talking about a baby, it makes them feel that in themselves often because
Yes,
they see it, they see the purity, or maybe they go out into nature and they're taken by the beauty of a sunrise or sunset,
right.
or maybe they have an animal. So the love that you're referring to, I think everybody has had it pressed in them by something,
Yeah,
which then has the question of, oh, where is that love? It's in you, in me, in all of us. Things are triggering it, but we can learn to trigger it ourselves without having someone or something. If we learn to nurture the source of that in ourselves, then you just rest into that. And I think we all need to have multiple ways. Like I talk about multiple doors into your home that different
Yes.
ways to enter your home depending upon the moment. And I'm thankful that after decades of just meditation and being very cerebral about the whole process, even though I've been in my body and teach body work stuff, the past few decades has been way more my body, and the level of integration with it is so much more fulfilling than dissociating and having this wisdom from a witness perspective than wisdom in our bodies and the celebration of connecting in humanity is
Absolutely.
is really incredible. So I really feel what you're saying, and the difference of just meditating in your mind and your spirit, if you will, are high, and missing the body part. It really is. I don't know. It's like night without day or day without night. It's not complete. I think, at least for me, it wasn't.
It isn't, and I want to take something that you said really wisely and move with it for a moment. We don't arrive into love and just stay there. In my experience, awakening isn't any arrival. Yes, we come into an ocean of the self, but within the ocean there's constant movement. There's waves that maybe don't go anywhere, but there's waves.
Hmm.
And therefore it is through the portals of allowing, feeling life is always bigger than us, always going to be acting on us, and always going to bring something out. And you think, Jonathan, I thought you resolved this, 3 years ago, and it comes again, right? Or 30 years ago, but it comes in a whole new way. And so that love is an action. It's in the process of relating to everything like you do to a beautiful sunset, a flower, and a child, and staying in the hearth of your being and allowing every experience to be a portal. The worst feelings, right? The worst feelings. Recently I had an experience where I went, oh my goodness, inadequacy is arising again because I was interpreting somebody's text and going, that's happening because I'm hateful. And I went, hateful? Wow. Where did that come out of? And I went, oh, there is an energy bigger than me. And I checked in with a very energetically attuned friend and I went, oh, it's not just me. So being with it, what I really want to say is that many of us are brought up through a tradition or a religion, Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, Sufism, Judaism, and forgive me if I've left anything out. It's all amazing at its roots. I feel like I'm a worshiper, devotee at the altar of Christ consciousness, as I am of the word Yahweh, which alludes to our breath. And everything is here. If we, in its vibrational essence, it's just, it got interpreted at the sort of the fight flight place, which needs to control, which needs to circumscribe and have algorithms so that it can be recognized and validated as being completely innocent and important. And as we allow ourselves to tend to what is here in this moment, even while we're busy doing things in the world, and slow and soften to do that, something shifts. And there is my experience of what love is will not be yours. Because in my way of how this has been taught, not through books, but a real lived experience of everything teaching that God is stillness and God is emanation at the same time. And we're part of that emanation. The divine is having so much fun being us. And being, sometimes the divine's having fun being a jerk. That too is an experience. There's a poem that I wrote called Faith, if I might share. If prayer, presence, and psychedelics thin the veil, what might we see? And what is the veil? Is it a learned concealment? Have we survived the wound only to continue to hide so much? The fear, the doubt, and loneliness, so contained that they roar in our ears like ocean waves crashing into a dark cave? Is there a faith in a sublime transparency? And if there is faith, we harness the power of our waters to ask for the way.
It's very beautiful. To me, I heard that as what you've been sharing, this third of, like when I was talking about the Ayurvedic, the therapy, and then this. And what I'm hearing is each person, whether they picture themselves being a gardener or a mother or whatever that caretaker is, of caretaking for all of you. and finding something in yourself that can embrace all of you from a loving, caring, inclusive place of this is all part of being human.
Right.
And if I fight any of it or deny any of it, it's going to be more controlling. And if I can just see it for what it is and then embrace it, I can be the caretaker. And like I have all these children inside of me that I need to care for.
Yes, and bring the light through every single one of those children or parts or subpersonalities, whatever we call them, all the petals around the flower, bring the light through. And that's ultimately our divine, our soul mission. However it is, we're supposed to find that and honor that. And for me, I'm an incredibly playful person. And one of the things that I never really spoke about so far with you is how much creativity and play open all the doors all at once. I mean, I love, I went to residency in Tennessee, a very conservative Christian place, and they said, "What church do you go to?" And I said, "Go to the Church of Monty Python." Didn't like it very much, but it's that song, "Always Look on the Bright Side of Death." I can sing it and whistle it, and it's to me, it's irreverent reverence. And I teach laughing yoga, and I just
Mm.
love laughing.
Yeah, I love that.
I just, play is everything. And we ultimately, I think our nervous system, all of our nervous systems relax to a point where we start co-creating with the divine as the divine, and something dissolves. Old stories we had about ourselves through allowing and belonging to
Mm.
what is start to dissolve. And there is an emergence. And that emergence isn't a single thing. It can be seconds. It can last hours. It can last days. And then we're back sweeping, right?
Mhm.
We're back being a jerk somewhere. And someone saying, "Wish you hadn't said that." It's all good. It's all playful.
Yeah, yeah. Yesterday at the dojo, there was this one little kid that was like 5 or something, and everybody's doing movement, and he said, I feel like it's not me moving me, like he was experiencing what we're talking about. And
Wow.
me and the other instructor were like, wow, we can see it in you right now. And then later that day, the instructors and I were training with a guy we trained with in jujitsu. And we had this conversation of if somebody acknowledges something about you as like a beautiful, authentic thing as a person, how people take it, receive it in different ways. Oh, no, not taking. And I said, yeah, at some point for me, and this is going to your creativity part, is that I can say to somebody, yes, I thank you. I can see what you're saying. But just so you know, if I was coming from just my human, insecure, fearful place, it would be a very different thing you'd be feeling. And so it's an acknowledgement of allowing the deepest part of me to come out and not the fearful, insecure part is what they're referring to. So it's not me taking possession of it because it's the isness that's already there that you're talking about. And I think with creativity, I think it's the same. I think it's when we are not interfering,
Yeah.
even if we've ever learned it once, we completely forgot it. It's being created in you for the first time that you're aware of. And I get to experience the joy of that discovery. So if someone's like, oh, that's a beautiful thing you came up with, it's like, oh, I loved it when I was doing that. It was such a fulfilling experience. So it's more part of the we of the participation of the creation than, oh yes, I did that because I'm so brilliant. It's like that is that's so false as far as the truth of where true creativity comes from and true
Yeah.
doing in the world.
Jim Carrey, the guy who did Liar Liar, he's amazing. I heard him speak once, and he said he was 8 years old. He was coming down the stairs hearing his father talking about him, and somebody in the dinner party downstairs was saying, "Oh, your son's a ham." And his father said, "He's not a ham, he's the whole pig." And that's what happens when we are creative. We become the whole pig.
It's right
It's
on.
just so beautiful and evolves naturally. I just want to tell people, there's a song I've sung so many times in the retreats that I've led. You don't have to know the way knows the way. You don't have to find the way, trust the way, feel the way knows, the way knows, the way knows the way.
Hmm. It's right on. It's like saying love is the source, love is the path, and love is the goal, and love is the way.
Love is,
Yeah. That's beautiful. It's beautiful.
yeah.
So before I ask you my next question, which is about some of the work that you do in relation to your own practices, is there anything else you'd like to share about the internal journey of nurturing our soul and taking care of our humanity and as far as people's inner practices?
Yes, two things. Yesterday, a colleague texted me and she said, "Thank you. I just said to my patient this thing that you had said to me." And I went, "Really? I said that?" Because I don't remember. The downloads happen. And she said, "Yes, you said a whole body yes." And I went, "Of course." Right. This is how we know we're in that space, a genuine organic space of love. There's like a sensation of a whole body yes. The second thing, after she wrote that to me, then it downloaded, connecting to the love is the way, is you can't hurry love. No, you just have to wait. But once that love gets going, you can't stop the flow.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's right on. I've said this many times before, but if there's one thing that made me really sad, it would be that there's so much love in every person and so much joy and so much playfulness and creativity, and not for some reason getting to experience it. It's just, you're like, oh, that beauty is right there in you. And this identification of other things. And I'm not saying it's always easy by any means, but that way that you're referring to is always stronger than the stuff, but that's not our experience of it at times. So just that separation that people experience and not realizing how beautiful each person is and how beautiful people are, even people that have done heinous things in the world. If you get beneath that, there's got to be a spark of love and light in there that they can tend to and begin their own healing process inwardly.
Yeah. And I love, I love that. And I was just really feeling that again yesterday in a whole new way. And you alluded to the sunsets and being out in nature. Download that was brought through recently is something we all know, something that's been talked about in so many contexts, that we're the forest. And so the message directly came, walk the forest. And this came in the context of a deep contemplation in which I was holding really deep feelings of despondence that I didn't even know was there. And I was like, I've got so much, what can I possibly teach? And they said, and they showed me the forest. And it was wordless, but the meaning that came through and more will continue to unpack itself is that every tree in the forest, every plant, every being in the forest has a different shape and a different texture and a different kind of a movement, that if we think at all that in this life we're aiming and floating towards enoughness by ourselves, that's a bit narcissistic. That when we are in the forest, we're supporting and tending and being tended by the way, that's enoughness right there. And there's a way in which the light in a forest, depending on what kind of forest it is, comes through completely differently in different parts of the forest. And everything is responding to the light, to the moisture in the ground, to the amount and type of soil that there is, to what has dug up and what hasn't dug up, to what is arising, birthing, and what is dying. And, the image that I had is, and the maggots are laughing in the carcass, right? It's all moving together. And we don't know why somebody, and there's many people in the world and perhaps the US right now who we won't name but bless in this conversation, who may feel as if they're on the wrong track or they're really far from the light, but we don't know.
Mm.
Hold the don't know, because that comes through really softly,
Mm.
right? In the whole, we don't know what's unfolding. And just that. The more I say that, the dumber it's going to sound.
Yeah, yeah, I'm with you. If I step back and try to look at human life, when we're born as a baby, we can't, as far as I know, consciously say like, "Oh, I see that I'm here." I spoke with some Montessori teachers the other day, and the podcast I put out this weekend, it was so beautiful to speak with them. But they referred to Maria Montessori talked about a child's cosmic task, right?
Mm.
So there's purpose. And so I want to speak with you a little bit about hospice work and human purpose, what you may see that as. But if I look at a baby, whatever the truth is of how it all happens, they seem to come in with different things, but that spark is always there, regardless of who they are, where they are. And it seems like staying close to that spark in them is going to allow them to have the most joyful life and most connected, aligned life. And then at the end of life, I would love for you to share with this, but I've heard that at the end of life, biggest things people regret is not being themselves, not allowing more time to love. And I know when I was with my mom when she passed some time, 20 years ago or so, I was holding her hand and my wife was holding the other hand and I was encouraging her to let go. And it was this very powerful experience. And my experience with the hospice workers, they were out there in that moment, but was that these people that just felt like these traveling carriers of love and understanding and became part of your family. And so these intimate moments of birth and death. And I always, for myself and anyone that I could support, I'm always looking at how do we make the most of our life and how do we learn from looking at babies, looking at people that are dying or moving on. And so, in your experience of hospice work and working with people and your current perspective of the purpose of life and anything that you have learned from being around so many people moving on that may help inspire people to keep the most important things in their life and not get taken away by the current of the busyness of modern day living.
Yeah, that question is so rich, Jonathan, that we could spend a week with it, right? Just talking as we are. But I want to offer some things. First, this work is sacred, and I'm really lucky to have lucked into it. I went into hospice through the back door. I'm like, I'm not leaving, not
Mm,
leaving, keep me. And because the veils are so thin and because the teaching is so profound, I think the first thing for anyone to listen is to know we can't do it wrong. And that brings tears to my own eyes, to the innocent parts of me that think we can do this wrong and that there's a good death and a bad death, a good life and a bad life. And this mission, this soul mission, this child, this 5-year-old in your dojo who said something is moving me, I think we need to respect that. And as physicians and as hospice teams, we offer comfort in the process. And as a teacher now, I'm offering kindness and comfort as my primary transmittance and presence. We get to go down that river screaming if we want to. And there is an element of choice, right? We can scream or we can try to have fun and offer comfort to ourselves. There's so many families in hospice who are so afraid of getting addicted to opioids that they refuse to treat the pain that's in front of them. And what we do is we honor in our meetings, we go, wow, this family's doing this. And then we go, wow, let's honor that. And I always ask the question, what can they receive
mm,
right now? And every death is like an awakening for the survivors. So even if it was a really painful death filled with agitation or a really peaceful death, it's still a deep, deep learning to the children and to the nieces and nephews and great grandchildren who are left behind. From that perspective, this is a no shame zone. Life is a no shame zone, and we get to experience it however we want. And one of the downloads that I had one day while I was on walking, as it happens, is, sweetie, there is some evidence actually through researchers looking at near-death experiences that in one of those studies with people who had cardiac arrests and they were monitoring for this, they came back and they said it was only an N of 3, right? 3 or 4 people, but they said there was life review.
mm,
So the things that spiritual, getting tears again.
mm,
Gosh, I'm so close to them in this podcast.
mm.
So thank you for holding that kind of a space with me, Jonathan.
Thank you.
And so many traditions say there's a life review. And I don't know what that is. Those are dense, heavy, stumbly,
Hmm.
fumbly, bumbly words. But as I was walking, I received, sweetie, what if you participate in your life review right now? You're both here and you're there,
Hmm.
and you're looking and you're cheering yourself and you're supporting and tending everything about you right now, every choice, every kindness now, which again comes back to there's nowhere to be, there's nothing to change. And this idea that somehow we have to change and transform, and maybe from the world of meditation sit for 500 hours, right? So that whatever satori can happen, I don't know if that's not still the middle prefront top down rather than a bottom up of what's needed right now.
Mhm.
That's the teacher because it's the energy is showing up. We just follow and track and tend to the energy. And so there's a way in which, even as we move along, all of our little losses, all of our little griefs, to the extent that we can drop in to the center of them, but without traumatizing ourselves, right? Sometimes all we can do is tending is a near process. We sit in the forest, know that there's a forest all around us. We're not alone. Maybe we sit with somebody in the forest and we drop in. And there's many ways in which I work with my emotions. For instance, one of the most innocent ways is that I scribble them out. I've got these crayons that I love, that are
Mm.
really soft. Crayola no longer makes them, so I've bought most of them off the jungles of Amazon.com. And I'll scribble out the emotion, no image in particular, and then I will draw all around it. I'll color the golden light of awareness. They were years where that's all I did.
Mhm.
That came through as a download, and it's totally nonverbal, taking us back to the innocence of experiencing, but taking the narrative out of
Mhm.
an energetic experience of emotion. And then we drop into a deep, wide field of infinite possibility. We just do somehow,
Mhm.
if it's a second of a glimpse. And that's death before dying. And I want to say that the greatest teachers have encountered fear. And that's really okay. There was a couple years ago in the New York Times, there was an article by somebody who was tending to Ram Dass, the great teacher Ram Dass, who said, "We're here to walk each other home, or you and
Mhm.
I." But he couldn't breathe at the end of his life, close to the end. And the guy said, and he was absolutely panicked. And he was disappointed, like, wait,
Mhm.
all this work, why you panicked? It's because this is our human body, boo.
Mhm.
The lungs can't breathe. They send
Mhm.
panic to the brain. And maybe everything that Ram Dass had done in his life to prepare the soil of his being, to sit in the ground of his being and therefore the ground of all being, he could then return to it after the panic,
Mhm.
right? And go, sweetie, oh, sweetie, I'm so sorry. That was horrible to not be able to breathe. Let's turn up the morphine and the
Mhm.
Ativan and the oxygen. Let's tend and bring comfort.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's cruel to think that there's some sort of an arrival and that we can do death perfectly. We
Mhm.
don't know how it's going to happen. We have no idea what illness we're going to have, how it's
Mhm.
going to unfold, right? How dysfunctional we're going to get, how soon somebody's going to have to change our diapers, right?
Mhm.
Or we really don't have control as we think on any of that. And one of the things that's happening in hospice, because I'm also part of the admin where I admit people and I'm writing down all of their conditions, and I go, wow, that's another condition. That's another condition. There's
Mhm.
this cancer. It's like people don't seem to run out of the unique ways in which conditions present. And there's the lesson right there.
Mhm.
The other lesson is that we're not going to complete. It's not going to be neat, no matter how much preparation we do, how much great communication, how much self love. It's just, we're never complete by ourselves, which is why the forest is complete, an individual in it.
Mhm.
Trying to get to completion, no, it's just, you know, that's why the maggots are probably laughing. And to accept that now,
Mhm.
accept that in fact maybe the shame that we're carrying and the terror and the fear, we got to hold it a little bit.
Mhm.
It's showing up again at the end of life, and how beautiful it would be to tell our families and our friends, if that shows up, please love me through it. Tell me this is a no shame zone. It's all welcome, and it's all a part of my healing, which is returning to the wholeness of everything that I am. And your wholeness and my wholeness are not the same.
Yeah, I remember when you're speaking, I remember being with my mom and we had a relationship where she kind of looked to me as her spiritual support or whatever you like to say. And so I was holding her hand and she was looking into my eyes and it was very clear that she was about to leave. And so I just kept encouraging. I would say, "Ah, it feels so good to let go." And then she would let go and she would go, "Ah." And I kept doing that. And then
Yeah.
at one moment when I saw like she was about to leave her body, my personal survival nervous system kind of went, and then I saw her stop and stop. And I was like, no, let go, let go. So in that moment, it was, there's my mother, right? So on a human mother child level, I mean, I was an adult. That's real.
You're
That's
her
real.
child.
Yeah, that's real. And then also it felt to me like I was giving birth in a way. It was so intense afterwards. I was like, oh my God. And it was such a deep experience of all of it, like you're talking about. Like it wasn't neat and clean, like a perfect little folded up thing, but there was so much love and so much trust and connection and acceptance that this was happening. And how can I embrace my humanity, but love, be there as a person is loving. And I remember even like taking, shifts and going to the bathroom or something. And then all of a sudden out of nowhere, just tears would come up. And then I would be like, okay with that. And then, I go back and it was just, and my wife was there too. And she was really beautiful with my mother and all. And so, and my dad and brothers and all, but it was just, looking at that and how intense it was. And yes, with my mom, but still to see you and other people that are doing this on, I don't know, like a daily or how many people a day basis, it's such a profound experience that is so intense. And I would imagine for you all, if you're really in it, in the godliness and the humanity, however, what words we want to use, that it's very rewarding and draining at the same time. And not rewarding and like, oh, fun, fun, but that you were there to support somebody from love.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for sharing all of that. And I could feel every moment of what you shared, including the right. And imagine here that her eyes are closed. She's not looking at you, but the limbic connection, that primary connection between a mother and child, in fact, two connected beings, you and your wife, it's right there to the end. And in hospice, we're not tending the release of our family. We're professionals in a church.
Hmm.
And so it makes a huge difference. And we work in teams. We process this all the time. And there's nobody that feels alone. And it's a really beautiful tending process. And there are 5 things that in my process of working with people in hospice, 5 mantras came through. May I share?
Please.
Which you were already doing with your mom. I love you. Just really saying that, in that it's almost like saying it with a microphone when the veils are so thin. It goes, I love you, I love you, I love you. It resonates. Thank you. Thank you for being my mother, father, sister, friend. It's okay for you to go. And you were already doing this. I'm going to be okay. We're going to take care of each other. And often we find that people who are responsible, like parents, hang on till they hear that. That last piece is so beautiful and so important. Sometimes in gorgeous families such as yours, you and your wife, in a tenderness and union, it's implicit.
Mhm.
And you may not have had to hold it, but it's never a bad idea
Yeah.
to.
No, we actually did have some of that because my mother was concerned about, like, say, my father and another family member and all, and so she needed them both to tell her that they're gonna be okay.
Yes,
She really needed that, like, even I think she even said that, like, "Well, what are they gonna do?" And I
there
think
you
I
go.
asked them both to tell her that they're gonna be okay and they're gonna help each other and all.
There you go. You did that really intuitively,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because that sort of awareness isn't in a book.
Yeah.
Came through the divine, through your presence. And we simply know when we're open, when we're tending to our body and the nervous system is soft, open, and relaxed. I call it wow. There's a wonder, openness, and a willingness.
Mm.
And and that sound itself coming through is just incredible. And no matter what we think of him, the Apple guy, at the end of his life, he said, wow, oh wow, oh wow.
Mhm.
He had died from pancreatic cancer, which is really painful, right?
Yeah, I've
But
heard,
he
yeah.
goes, "Oh, wow, oh, wow, oh, wow."
Mhm.
So I think that there's a way in which we can perhaps, no matter what manner of death it is, assume that we're falling into a softening.
And that was what I saw with my mother. Like when I kept saying, it feels so good to let go.
Yeah.
She like the sound was right. And that's what I'm like, I think we're alluding to so much is
Yes.
how do we take care of our forest so you
Yes.
can have that now, so you can have that rest now.
Yeah.
And with that question, it's when you are with people that are in these ending periods of their life, if they happen to be conscious, have you seen a consistent thing with people where like the clarity that's coming through them at the end of their life, of clarity messages that you see over and over again that you would like to share?
I think what I can say is, and by the way, that is a mini micro practice we can do all the time. That came through as a download. That's the most honest way to live, is to say it's an expression of the smallest satisfaction. And in fact, Rick Hansen says that when you register even a tiny delight and allow it to just sort of slosh around your body, the you don't have to keep saying it, but the sensation of it, when you register that for even 20 to 30 seconds, multiple times a day, your brain has a neuroplastic effect, starts changing towards well-being.
Mm-hmm.
So what I noticed wasn't necessarily verbal reports of clarity, but a sense of deep peace
Hmm.
and families smiling
Hmm.
after the end, like, wow, just, and those patients who are with us in the, that's where I would encounter patients who were dying, or we're at the inpatient care center where people came for intractable symptoms and then would go back home, but sometimes would die, is you'd walk in the room and it'd be like, wow, this isn't a physical light, but I can feel the light in my body. And that can be anybody, and have tended to be people who've lived more peacefully
Hmm.
and who had a more connectedness and a relational experience in their life and with their family. Sometimes, often, perhaps unheld trauma will show up at the end of
Hmm.
life as chaos, as intense agitation, as screaming, as helplessness, and as thrashing around before somebody's able to release.
Hmm.
And this too is a clarity for those who are left behind. Yeah,
And it is a release too, like you're saying, like they are releasing it then, I guess, of like a release that maybe they weren't able to have when they're alive. They're releasing it toward the end, energy.
that's right.
Yeah.
And they couldn't
Yeah.
complete it for whatever reason. And it's done. Their experience is now complete
Hmm.
in this human.
Yeah. Yeah. So it seems, and I would love for you to share how you'd say it seems like using your forest analogy that we're all here in this forest and the forest is includes everything and it's miraculous. And if we're just running around trying to see everything in the forest from an energy that's from angst, then we're
Yes,
not really going to know ourselves as the forest. But if we're willing to tend to anything that interferes with our vision of the sunset in us and outside of us, once we tend to that, then we can do the resting into the throughout the day as much as we can. And that just kind of lets us spend more time in that forest, the home, than in running around trying to find the forest.
yes, on the outside. That's right.
Yeah.
But there are forests on the outside that help us really meet that on the inside. You can look at one tiny little flower in a forest, and that's sweet enough for an entire lifetime, but there'll be a curiosity that'll arise for that piece of light and how it lands on a leaf. I have two friends, and they and I always share photographs of how the light is playing with nature. It's like we were obsessed with it. We can't get enough of it. And one friend and I, we will photograph something, that light resting on the leaf in our hands without disturbing the tree. And it's like the most amazing thing just happened.
And when you shared that, it goes back to something I say a lot of that children have this spark. And as people become adults and socialize, most people tend to lose that identification of the spark. And I think if we have the opportunity and the conscious awareness of it, we're returning to that spark and that innocence of a child of, whoa, look at that. And so you and your friends have returned to the innocence of childhood with the wisdom of knowing how to navigate the world and take care of that.
It's so true. the return or the innocence is always there. In fact, it's just, we turn it down in order to go to med school or whatever. But
Mhm.
it's always there. The play is always there. It's just, and I'm so happy to hear you say with the wisdom of the adult, because we don't want to go back to being children. They don't have selves yet, and we've manifested in order to have a self. And we have to have a self before we can have no self.
Yeah, and I think for me, and I would love you tell me, in my own experience of all of this is when I'm in this place of rest and love and clarity and creativity, I don't know of anything that I don't do better than when I'm coming from tension or fear or stress or competition. It's like even the logic of, oh, this is really important. I have to be serious and I've got to grind. I do that better if I'm in a state of rest and love and creativity than I do from grinding. So it's like there's nothing that I remember when I was first introduced to martial arts in this way and I didn't believe it to be real. I was like, I can't do that. But now I'm like, how did I even believe that moving like water isn't better than moving like a stick? Like, how was I so, like in my mind, so rigid that I couldn't even see that that made so much sense? So everything to me from this state that we're talking about, there's nothing in my mind and experience that isn't better served from being in that. It doesn't matter what it is. Even if I'm like, oh, I'm going to use my logical mind right now to figure out this math equation, still coming from this open, creative, present place is going to serve me better. So I've debunked everything in myself that I can say, but I have to be this way for this. No, I'm just identifying with fear, insecurity, or something, and that is not going to serve me better. And so I can justify it if I want, but the truth is that's not my experience. I've never not done something better than when I've been in love and creativity than in fear.
By the way, I keep drinking water because I know your lips and your throat are dry. I'm drinking I
Thank you.
always keep warm fluids next to
Yeah,
me because the water is critical, feeling the flow inside. And you're alluding to something that I hope it's okay that I can offer a little discernment with.
please.
And that is this sense of things going better,
Mm,
which is the dualistic mind, even at that quote unquote fourth dimensional level of being a sneaky devil, of this is better, we're aiming towards that. And it's true that there is just a more expansive, playful experience when we're in love. But we can speak to that experience without making it better.
mhm,
And it sometimes is not the way what our soul has chosen to experience in this life. I don't know.
mm,
I'm speaking as if I know and I don't know. And maybe some of us have signed on to experience that so that while others are rushing around, we're sitting and we're radiating compassion. Can we extend compassion to the part of us that moves around like a stick? And the only reason it's moving like a stick, as I was observing this morning just before joining you, jerking around, because that's how the fight flight system moves. And at least in our human bodies, right? With
mhm,
jerky movements. And so it fills me with compassion to hear that rather than any desire inside me to ask you to move out of it,
mm,
simply to rest near you, to look at that and see what's that experience like for you, to feel that. However, if we judge that as wrong from a space of doctrine,
mhm,
then we're going to judge the shit out of it and reject it. And that's the self abandonment.
mhm,
Rather than perhaps, and again, that word rather than is a dualistic term. My experience is, and see how quickly it moves in, not this, but it's an and process that can be there.
mhm,
And we can watch an unfolding by allowing something that's, feels really good and softening to go, wow, this isn't feeling so good right now, right? And it's, sweetie, is this what you want, my beloved? Do you want to continue to feel that? And it's like, it feels a little maybe sickly, right? And it's a
mm,
little scary. There's a relief and in slowing and softening and to and beyond that, sometimes that kind of grace just comes from the outside. It's not us doing it.
mhm,
That's the sneaky thing of even a meditative posture. And literally,
Yeah, yeah.
which is I'm going to sit and I'm going to meditate and I'm going to calm. I'm going to do something. And even it's so innocent. It's everywhere. It's all in all the traditions. There's a heavy identification towards a doctrine and
Mhm.
towards a particular destination. And even rest might sound like a destination, but something unfolds just in stepping into relationality and in sitting by the hearth of our being. Something completely new unfolds when we tend to ourselves, and that we don't know what that is. I think we're all still each writing our Bible because it
Mhm.
doesn't exist at a collective level from the viewpoint of the body.
I think there's something with what I've seen you do throughout this podcast, and I think this is what I'm pointing at, alluding to, is that you've stopped. You're like, and I'm just verbalizing it. Something is like, wait a second, I really want to be in this when I say this, or I
Mhm.
really want to take a moment, and that's to me, I think that right there is the gift of the awareness of, oh, right now I'm going for a ride in something and there's not a judgment, there's not a heaviness. And wow, I'm going to rest into this. I'm going to take this moment to not, I don't feel it from you at all out of a heaviness, out of a doctrine. It's out of, I want to taste this a little bit more, right? Oh, I want to drink. I'm thirsty. It's not out of a dogma, but I definitely, at least I don't feel that. I definitely know what you're referring to by what I said. And been there and I've done that. I've seen that. I think it's different when it's inside yourself of, oh, I want to feel this when I say this. I don't want to just say it, and giving ourselves that space to shift.
Right, right. When the first word I said to you, this is the frequency of blessing, that we can look at a word like blessing to those who speak English, and then we can listen to the tone with which it's offered and the sound of the word. And then we can keep moving to the vibration of it and then the feeling that it has. And that, you know, if we want to play in that playground, gosh, sky's the limit, literally in the grounds. There's just a limitless space to play there, and it's playful, and it might take us somewhere amazing, might if we're in a traumatized space be really scary. But what I want to say is that if we want to play in this space and it feels safe enough to do so, right? I keep coming back to safety, because if we're again in a trauma activated state, or the grief is really high, that's what needs to be tended to. And then in that tending of that trauma with others or with self, here's a series of questions that we can play with, that came through this morning as a litmus test of where we are. The questions: is my heart opening?
Mhm.
My body relaxing? Is my mind softening? Is my breath easing? Are all of my emotions and reactions and sensations feeling welcome? Am I feeling opening to life? Am I honoring life? Am I participating in life?
Very beautiful. It's amazing what the right questions can do as opposed to a statement. The answering supports you in going deeper to that place.
Yes, yes. I wanted to share, if that's okay, something. You can keep these in the podcast, or if you feel they're valuable, but two other poems that came through that I think really support this stance of us, you and me, cheerleading everybody in their path, in their progress, in their beauty without a destination, right? The pathless path. And also cheerleading ourselves. So this one went through a few years ago. It's called Loving the Wild. Listen to your ordinary voice until you hear the untamed. So I'm going to stop here, that usually the ordinary voice is pretty circumscribed in what is acceptable. But listen until you hear the untamed. Flute sweet and organ deep. Even one wild note leaves limbs tingling. Let loose your outer name, the subtotal of accomplishments waiting to arrive into a final reflection of someone else's value. Speak your soul. You are the indigenous one, the fresh detail, the cavorting cat, the mountain raven, the heart of a sunflower. that marvelous light center of all geometries, where you can calmly, wordlessly align with your deepest truth. And as you hear that, right, what does that feel like? Not what does it mean, but what does it feel like inside you? There's the one that came through maybe a year ago. It's called In the Nest. There's a word I use in it called witnessing. This comes from my friend Karin Dremel, the amazing teacher and traumatologist, where she took the word, actually, it exists in the collective intelligence. William James used it. So it's not just witness, which is what we do when we're in contemplation, but witness, that relational offering to self. Witness. Okay. It's called In the Nest. And I offer this to you as my blessing. You are bringing into the world a new life, a wisdom, a presence like there has never been. The doorway of mastery is deep inside the nest, witnessing. Deep inside the nest, the doorway of pain is squeezing and stretching you to bring through a cry of freedom, a new joy, a new love like there has never been. Oh, I have tears reading that.
Very powerful.
Thank you. And it's just such a blessing that you can't do this wrong. And there's something coming through you, and the way knows the way.
It's beautiful. Wow. This time together has been very, very intimate and very rich and joyful and deep and all things that I love. And I'm thankful that we got connected and we got to spend this time together, and thankful for your dedication to love and humanity and yourself and healing yourself and supporting others and doing all that you're doing in the world. So thank you for your dedication to that. It feels very authentic and very full of love and humanity.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the deep service and love that you've offered me by your wonderful attunement and listening. And it's felt reverent and playful and inventive. And the emergence was happening throughout.
Thank you for being part of the Spiritual Ninja podcast. I really appreciate you being here. My goal with the podcast is to share heart to heart, soul to soul conversations. So if you would be so kind to share and to follow, that helps me get the word out about the podcast. Okay. Thank you, and hope to see you on another podcast soon.